and this is Natasha Kekemat-Lavrion, founder and CEO of PPEARL. You can call me Nat. I'd like to welcome all of you to episode 1 of the organizational sustainability series from Singapore. This series will consist of 3 one-hour episodes where respected thought leaders from Singapore will discuss the latest trends in organizational sustainability. The series is brought to you by Cognitive Talent Solutions, DCH, and HR Tech Hub. And on behalf of them, we welcome you to our webinar, as well as our distinguished speakers. So let's look at this wide topic of organizational sustainability and what it means. In the context of this series, it means having the leadership, talent, global insights, and change strategies necessary to rise to the unique challenges facing companies today to build resilience and long-term sustainability. Today's episode is titled The Role of Technology in Enabling Employee Wellbeing. So this episode will be structured as a fireside chat where our thought leaders provide you with their unique perspectives on this topic. And today, our speakers are Francisco Moran, co-founder and CEO of Cognitive Talent Solutions, Borko Kovacevic, Chief Operating and Marketing Officer, Microsoft Singapore, and Mayank Parikh, CEO of IHRP. So for the next 30 minutes, we'll discuss 2 questions with the panel, and then we'll have 20 minutes for the audience to ask questions to the members of the panel. So please type your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll put them forward to the panelists during the Q&A. So the first question I have for our panel is the following. How is your organization or organizations that you observe rising to the challenge of achieving employee well-being in the current environment? Francisco, how are you today? It's 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. where you are.
Hi, Nat. Yes. I come originally from Spain, but I'm based in California. So it's night here. I have previous experience living and working in Singapore, and part of our team is in Singapore as well. So really excited to be kicking off this series with you today.
Well, okay, I'm going to begin by asking you, how is your organization, or how do you see companies achieving employee well-being in this environment?
Yeah, well, at CTS, from an internal team perspective, we are operating with a group of team members that are spread across different countries. We have some team members in the United States, some people in Europe, and some people in Asia Pacific, including Singapore. So because we operate across different time zones, we have to be very conscious of the timing of our communications. So we make sure that everyone has the right to disconnect from work from time to time. I believe in the current environment, because companies are either working with hybrid work models where they have part of the team working from home and part of the team in the office, or some companies like ourselves are working fully remotely. One of the main challenges to employee well-being is that you can easily fall into the always on culture where for employees it's really difficult to disconnect from work, right? So I see this is one of the main challenges for us, and that I'm seeing for other companies. This is something that both large and small companies should be watching out for in the current situation. One of the ways we mitigate this problem is by leveraging the capabilities of technologies like passive organizational network analysis. So what we do is that we monitor our own digital footprint in collaborative tools that we use on a regular basis, such as Office 365 or Slack. And by analyzing this digital footprint, first of all, we can do it in a way that is respectful with our own team members. So we don't analyze data at individual level, only at team level, and we don't analyze the content of the communications. But we can get insights on things like what's our response time, what percentage of communications are sent outside of working hours, what's our level of productivity, and so on. So this is really useful when it comes to getting a picture of what's going on when working in a partially or fully remote environment. From an external perspective, we also like to help our clients and the partners we work with on a regular basis, not only by helping them analyze their digital footprint, but also through what we know as active organizational network analysis. So here we use online surveys to identify who are the informal leaders, what are the peripheral employees, and if they have organizational silos or bottlenecks. And I think this is also useful in the context of employee well-being, because what we have noticed working with clients is that people that join companies during the pandemic, they had the onboarding process working remotely. So they didn't have the opportunity to develop interactions with their peers. On average, new hires that joined during the pandemic have 61% fewer interactions with their peers than people that joined before the pandemic. So by identifying who are their informal leaders and positioning them as bodies of these new hires, they can accelerate the time to productivity. This is also a way to mitigate employee well-being. So these are some of the trends that we see in the industry and how we use it at CTS as well.
Right. Thank you. Mayank, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So my question, same one. How have you seen organizations striving to ensure employee well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, I think very, very much similar to Francisco. I guess the main challenge is really the always-on culture that we see. I think it's certainly something that organizations are not very used to, because in the past it was very clear separation between work and home, and this is something that has been forced into companies to have to adjust. And certainly, I think layer that with the certainly on the physical and the safety issues around the pandemic. I think that's another slew of measures that organizations are having to grapple with. So I think it's around how do we first of all look after the physical and the safety aspects of employees at the workplace, ensuring that there's sufficient management measures around transmission, reducing the risk of transmission, things like regular disinfectant surfaces, providing for sufficient access control and things like that. There's also certainly the need for us to provide employees with access to vaccinations, right? And ensuring that our benefit programs and our leave programs in particular facilitate access to vaccinations and even recovery from vaccinations. So I think those are some of the physical type of safety measures that organizations have put in place. In addition, I think there's also the emotional, the psychological measures around how do we support employees, particularly in sectors which are struggling, travel, tourism-related sectors, and to a large extent services are still very much struggling to kind of recover. And then that's the uncertainty that plays on employees in terms of, will they be financially secure? Will they have that support going forward? So companies are stepping up on that score as well, ensuring that those wellness programs are in place. And one area that companies, in particular in Singapore, have put in a lot of emphasis on training of managers. I think managers play a very big, important role, and how we can help managers lead with empathy and look out for some of the potential signs of mental well-being issues in the employees. So I think that's another area that organizations are beginning to put some emphasis on. And finally, I think one of the things which we always wanted to do is really how do we also connect the business side of things with well-being as a priority. And certainly, I think when organizations have a need to kind of respond to the pandemic in a meaningful way, in a way that really touches an employee's higher sense of purpose. For example, if you are kind of helping your community overcome some of the challenges with the pandemic, access to vaccinations, access to equipment, if you're in the medical field, access to even ventilators and medical devices. I think that's also something that by pivoting your business to help the communities that you serve, also helps to bolster an employee's sense of well-being. That yes, there is a war going on out there, but my place is really to support that effort in my own way. So I think that also helps. And in all things, technology is an enabler in every aspect of an organization's response. Technology, when used effectively, helping to alleviate the administrative burdens, having to help personalize a lot of those wellness programs that need to be in place. I think technology can be a huge benefit to those companies.
Right. Thank you, Mayang, for that. Hello, Boko. How are you today?
Very good. Very good.
Thanks for being here and joining us. Could you share the ways that Microsoft is prioritizing employee well-being at work?
Yeah, Microsoft is, we've always been very big on employee well-being. Even before COVID, it's a theme that started around us thinking on how do we get to a point where workplaces are considered places of well-being, because we realized that even before COVID, you go to work and then you're stressed because of different reasons, you're drained, and you spend the better part of your day in the workplace, and you come back home and your energy is low, you're sometimes frustrated, you can't wait for the weekend. So effectively, you're spending your evenings with your family when you're not at your best, because you haven't been gathering energy, you haven't been actively powering up your batteries, you've been depleting them, right? And then when you come home, you're really not in the right mood to play with your kids or with your pets or being with your spouse or being a good neighbor. You just watch TV and go to bed. So many employees were giving us this feedback and saying, we want to feel better at work. We want a caring environment. And we started thinking about this model for managers, which we call model coach and care, where managers effectively care about the well-being of their employees. And it skyrocketed in importance when COVID came. It really became apparent that this is something not that we need to do, that this is something that's a must, because your bedroom or your living room, in certain cases, people have studies, but balcony, right? People are working from any possible place they can find in their home, because they're not allowed to go to the office. So as Francisco said, the lines are blurring between the home and work, and that work becomes then nonstop, which means that if you're not finding the right moments to re-energize, it's extremely hard for you to go through the week. And we've put in place really set of thinking and programs. And it's not just about technology and tools, but it's about really understanding people and what their needs are, and allowing this hybrid work to become something that's a benefit, right? And where we can really respect people's choices if they want to work from the office or they want to work from home. And with that, we needed to provide the right tools. So we are fortunate that Microsoft has always been a very digital company, and that we are using a lot of digital technologies, not because of COVID transformation, but because of, just we're the kind of company that adopts technology faster. So we were ready to start working from anywhere, because we think that work happens anywhere, in a coffee shop or in your home or in your office or when you're meeting a customer, which means that we need that flexibility. to allow not just work-life balance in that sense, but work-life integration to allow people flexibility to manage their own day and time. And that needed to change the way we think about space. So space needed to be a lot more inclusive. Office spaces and what we do when we're at work needed to become a lot more inclusive to different type of work. So it's not just the office space of, you know, traditional one where you have the booths and people are you know, having meetings in conference rooms, but also booths where you can take a conference call, or an open space where people can come and meet, or a cafe, because some people prefer being more creative around the you know, cafe area. So we really needed to change the spaces. We needed to change the approach in how we make workplace diverse and inclusive, from a perspective of allowing everyone to take a part in designing the workplace of the future. And for Microsoft, technology had a big role to play. Like we're really embracing technology like more than ever, and we're allowing our employees to really choose work at their own terms, which can be flexible from location perspective. It can be flexible from time zone perspective, unless, you know, for some reason your job is restricted to a certain time zone, and also from you know, even the kind of work you want to do. So if you want to move to a different time zone, you're going to move to a different country, and you want to work flexibly, flexible hours, that's completely okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and on our end, as a consultancy that works with clients and experts globally, we see very similar that successful organizations have leaders, processes, and systems that offer support and resources to facilitate this hybrid workforce. Right. In the past 18 months, it has shown, so much research has shown that people can be just as or even more productive, you know, when they're working outside the office or those traditional workplaces. So some companies have started to use technology to help create a healthy working culture. There are a plethora of apps available to do this. But of course, nothing beats good old-fashioned human touch and leadership. And organizations are those who are actually making choice and flexibility more commonplace are having happier employees, right? So that's about also building a culture of connection through check-ins, and basically communicate, and you cannot over-communicate. And those leaders listen, they really listen, and empathy has become a very important leadership skill as well. Yeah. Well, thanks for that, everyone. So we're going to move to the next question. What role will employee well-being play in achieving organizational sustainability in the future? Francisco, what are your views?
Sure. So, well, first of all, I think it will be useful to pick up just for a second the concept of organizational sustainability. This is a very relevant concept, yet many people, when they hear about sustainability, they might think about climate change, renewable energies, which is definitely one of the main challenges that companies are facing nowadays in the current environment. But by organizational sustainability, what we mean is equipping organizations with the people and structures that are needed for the challenges that we're facing in the 21st century, right? So in that context, I think we are very lucky to live in a very interesting moment in history, because most organizations have historically operated with very centralized and rigid work models, where employee well-being has been almost exclusively analyzed from the point of view of human capital metrics. In this context, by human capital, what we understand is the intangible economic value of a worker experience and skills. This covers things like education, training, intelligence, skills, health, and other things that employers value, for example, loyalty and punctuality, right? So the problem with this model is that in the current environment that is really defined by extreme levels of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, it has failed to some extent to adapt to a reality that is changing so fast. So what we are experiencing right now is a transition from those centralized and more rigid models to work models that are more decentralized and fluid. This is something that started before the pandemic, there was already a trend of people working from home and also a trend of automation and decentralization. The pandemic has really acted as a catalyst of these trends and have accelerated them. So in that transition, I think it's very important when it comes to employee well-being and also any other main challenges that will help us achieve organizational sustainability, that we expand our understanding, in the case of employee well-being, by considering not only human capital metrics, but social capital metrics. So in this context, what we understand by social capital is the network of relationships that people have when working in a particular organization and that help that organization to function effectively. In other words, organizations need to, in order to really tackle employee well-being, organizations need to stop thinking about themselves in terms of hierarchical structures, where the value of the employees is defined by the number of years of experience you have in the organization, by the role you have, and we have to start thinking of our organizations as a network of people that are interacting on a regular basis, people that face issues, as Mayank and Borko said, right? Isolation, anxiety, burnout. I think we're just starting to see the effects of the pandemic on mental health. And only by understanding that individuals are not isolated entities, but entities that operate in a network as a whole, we can really start tackling those issues. In that regard, for example, if we consider things like, is an employee working isolated from the network where that person is operated? Are we able to somehow monitor some of the internal collaboration dynamics of the organizations to understand how we can mitigate these issues from a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach? I think that as we move forward, only the organizations that can expand their understanding of themselves and not only focus on human capital metrics, but also consider social capital metrics and other new type of metrics that we're going to start identifying, are going to be able to adapt to this new reality. This is part of a larger type of change where the models of the organizations are aligning more with nature and with organic models than what we had before. Is something beautiful and interesting to see, right? But picking up some of the topics that Mayank and Borko mentioned, I think it's great to see leading companies like Microsoft that we look up to, for example, as a leading company in the people analytics space, right? See that they bet on giving employees their collaborative freedom that they need to work with whom they want, on the area that they want, on the terms that they want. I think that's really the right approach moving forward. And also picking up on what Mayank mentioned earlier, I think that not only physical well-being, but also mental health is going to be a very strong component of employee well-being moving forward that is here to stay.
Thank you for that. And now, Borko, what are your views on this?
Yeah, actually, I want to build on what Francisco was talking about. I think when Microsoft, when the pandemic started, there was interesting research that was done pre and post pandemic, at least maybe 9 months into pandemic, as I mentioned, when it comes to people analytics, and we were looking at the effect of the first 9 months, and we realized that the risk of burnout is huge because employees are faced with overwhelming amount of work and non-stop conference literally happening. And I'm sure that majority of the people sitting on this call and on the webinar, they're seeing the same, is that the amount of work is overwhelming and it's cutting into your private life, and it's very hard for employees to say how to prioritize things, like what should they do and what not. And then the organization almost has is telling us and understand, as you mentioned, how do we help these employees to prioritize better? How do we get managers to lean in if they see that the employees are overwhelmed? And data is telling us all of this. Like, data is telling us if employees are vastly overwhelmed, if they're amount of conference calls and amount of working hours. We literally have something called My Analytics and Workplace Analytics, which shows you for each individual, as well as at the group level, how employees are spending their day. How many days have you spent in the week where work has eaten into your personal hours. How many weekends have you been working? Like, we literally measure all these signals, and we can tell you, hey, maybe you should take a break, and maybe you should talk to your manager about managing your time. And managers have the not just the empowerment, but they have the company is asking them to check in on the employees, to check in if they're okay. And as Francisco mentioned, we did have employees which were, for different reasons, in different countries, they were isolated from the team members, either because of travel restrictions or because they've been hired in a country and then organizational changes happen and they were left alone. And I think that's a huge one where you need to start thinking about, given that we have taken for granted the social interactions at work, and we have taken all of this for granted on before COVID. Now, how do we get a bit more intentional around helping people to connect with their peers and connect with their managers? And we even look at and this is something that more successful managers have, is the data shows is the frequency of connecting between a manager and an employee. And if that frequency is at the sweet spot, you actually have not just a great relationship, but you have a thriving organization, which ensures that employees are feeling that they're in touch with the company, that they're emotionally engaged with their work, and that they're not slowly burning out. And this is, I think, key when we look at the tools that Microsoft is now building because of the response to all of this which is happening. Is not just about using Microsoft Teams to collaborate together. It's about getting these deep insights and understanding on how the technology can help you to even have simple things like having mindful moments. We've partnered with a company called Headspace that you might know, that will offer you tips around, hey, take a break, have a mindful moment, because your day is full. There's a lot of things going on. So if you're not intentional and if you're not thinking about this, it's very hard to go into overdrive. So Headspace is a mini example of what can help you to take that mindful moment. Your manager checking in on you having like these intentional group gatherings, which are very hard to do remotely. But again, if managers are intentional, if they demonstrate genuine caring for employees, the organization will thrive. And then all the private matters, like sending your kid off to a bus if you have kids and they're going to school, or maybe attending to your child while he or she is on home-based learning, right? Or going and getting some groceries, or all these things which are kind of intertwined with work now, they all get done and work gets done and employees are very happy. And that's the key in the future on how do we ensure that keeps on happening, where employees feel that their well-being is something that's top of mind for an organization, versus burning out through conference calls and maximizing productivity, which is very easy to happen if organization is not mindful around the effect on the human capital.
Indeed. Thank you for that. And Mayank, I saved the best for last. Can you please share your views?
Yes, I can't help agreeing with what has been said. I think the pandemic, if there's certainly anything that has that has come out of it, is really to help companies look beyond profits. Really, I think that's kind of the message here, that for sustainability, particularly with respect to the way you engage talents, this is a given. This is really something that organizations increasingly have to embrace, the social agenda, and really look at employees as a whole person, right? Take that whole person approach to designing and looking at the well-being policies, programs, looking at things from in evolving needs and aspirations as well, right? Because I think that's something that as we come out of the pandemic, we will have to grapple with quite a changing talent view out there, right? How talents look at the work, and how organizations need to fulfill some of the aspirations for those talents. So in all aspects, I think there's change needed for organizations to embrace. They need to demonstrate the care, the creativity, and to support overall holistically the employees' well-being. And HR has a critical role to play in all aspects, and to demonstrate that whatever investment that an organization is making on well-being programs, there is an ROI. There is certainly an ROI, and I think technology can play that part to help build that database around how can we measure some of those deliverables, some of those outcomes out of these programs. So I think it's an exciting future that we're going into, but certainly it will take a lot of change management to get things on even keel. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I'll just cap this discussion off to say, the rise of the digital native as the dominant demographic in the workforce is certainly one of the key factors that will define the future workplace. And from our observations, the future workplace hinges on three things: purpose, fulfillment, and well-being. So employers who place a focus on well-being is definitely the way to go, and it definitely will be a key pillar that all organizations need to focus on, because like we say, we've learned that we can get family, personal stuff done as well as work, and that's not going away. And at the end of the day, it's really interesting that as we become more digital, we definitely also need to become more human. Yeah. So now we're going to bring some questions in from the audience. And Lisam says here, so apart from training for managers, are there other initiatives that have been put in place to improve mental well-being? We see solid interventions that companies put in place to address physical well-being, but it is still rather touch and go on the mental well-being. So what's everyone's views?
Well, I can provide a quick example. In our experience, again, building on what I mentioned earlier of understanding social capital on top of human capital metrics, right? I think it's very important to identify proactively scenarios of isolation. This is extremely difficult to do when you don't see people working in the office, right? You might have a situation where you think as a manager that everyone is working with each other, and in reality, nobody's interacting with anybody, right? And we see, unfortunately, this very, very often, not only among new hires, but sometimes people that have been in the companies for more than 10 years, and they are completely isolated in the organization, right? So again, understanding what are your internal collaboration dynamics, whether it is by monitoring in a respectful manner, collaborative tools, or through online surveys, or through pulse surveys, or through interviews. I think it's a way to achieve that. But in the end, I don't see it that much as the question is it's not that much about the relationship of the manager with the employee, but ensuring that the employee is empowered to have collaborative freedom. I think this is an important switch of mentality that we need to have moving forward, right? We cannot depend on the managers to solve all the problems that the employees have. It's not the job of the employees to keep the employees motivated, but to really have employees that have at their disposal the tools and resources that they need to fulfill their true potential. And I think that, again, building on what I said earlier, exploring the importance of social capital and thinking about the organization in different ways are some of the keys that we see companies using more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I can add, I think at the practical level, I think there are things which companies can do to ensure that employees take regular breaks And just sort of if there is a virtual call that extends beyond an hour, just impose a break, right? And so that there's some kind of stretching or whatever that employees can get refreshed. But it's also opening up as many listening platforms as we can, so that we continue to engage employees to kind of understand what their challenges are, how do we alleviate stress, regular check-ins. And so I think these are very practical things that companies can do, to kind of help on the mental side, to kind of say, yes, there is a lot going on out there, but certainly there are things that can be done organizationally to help employees cope. And certainly, I think one of the things that we can in Singapore, what we are trying to do, get more companies to offer is more flexibility in terms of work practices, work arrangements. I think that will go a long way, as Boko mentioned, right? If you give employees the flexibility to not just get their work done, but also to help with domestic responsibilities as well, then I think that's a win-win for both, and overall a positive influence on their mental well-being.
Actually, on our end, what we've been responding to a lot of clients coming to us to ask us to do programs on combating burnout. So that whole session is around teaching leaders how to identify when they themselves are burning out. What are the signs? Because often we don't know that we're burnt out until we're burnt out. So it's about trying to catch those signs beforehand, and also catching those signs in other people. That's one of the things that we've been running in terms of programs. And then what to do, when you see those signs, how do you address them? How do you prevent them? And then some relaxation techniques and stuff like that. We also have a lot of clients coming to us to ask us to do, it's just fun. Like, we don't want training. We just want a whole lot of fun. Oh no, that looks like training. No, can you just do 3 half days of fun? And that's unheard of before. And we're naming our programs things like Sparking Joy, fun days. Yeah. So I think that actually there are organizations doing that. And the last thing I was going to say is also we've been reacting to clients asking us to do things like leadership in a hybrid leadership skills in a hybrid workforce environment. And then we've actually sectioned off a good amount of time to talk about what are leadership skills around addressing and helping mental well-being. So I think to address Lisam's question, a lot of organizations are moving in that direction, and there are a lot of training programs that are available. I'm gonna pull another question from the audience, and Randy asks, how do we track and measure something as intangible as mental well-being? I don't know about you guys, but I get those microscopes because we're all 365 users as well, and Cortana will tell me that I haven't been resting, and that's a good way to check whether my mental well-being is up to speed, right? Yeah. So yeah.
I think just from our side, I think we have to separate 2 things here, right? There is a mental well-being. You need a psychology expert, and there is a very defined method, right? That I think companies probably should not step into practically without having the right resources and training. What we can do with technology is look at potential indicators that can help you go in the right direction, right? So collaborative patterns, like how many communications are you sending outside working hours? Are you sending 70% of your communications at night, for example, right? Or what's your response time? Are you having a very long response time that has really changed with regards to your baseline. That can be really an indicator that something might be happening. Or again, like, are you completely isolated from your network? That definitely is a very red flag that can indicate you that something might be going on there. Or are you working with a group of people that are completely isolated in the organization? So in the end, it's about looking at the pieces of the puzzle and putting together a picture, and then going proactively and inquire and understand what's happening. Don't assume anything only based on the data, but go and speak with the person to really see what's going on.
Hold on, and I want to build on that. I think it's when Microsoft has, we started this again, even before COVID, but with COVID, because of the pressure on building the right kind of well-being environment, as well as the impact on people, right? Stress and everything that's going on. We had this term of purpose mindset, which is, how do you build the right kind of purpose in an organization which would get people to be emotionally engaged? There's I think it was Bloomberg or someone that or The Economist that did a study last year, which showed that over 70% of the people are emotionally disengaged because they're protecting from the burnout, right? They're trying to emotionally disengage so that they protect themselves from the overwhelming amount of things that's coming at them. So the things that we look is the emotional engagement at work, like how if people are present, if they're focused on what they do, and if they're looking at things which are tying their career aspirations and their potential, right, in the organization to their personal passion and their personal purpose, right, sense of purpose. So I think what we do is we do bi-weekly or minimum monthly sessions with employees where we bring in leaders to talk about their career paths and how others should be thinking about their careers, as well as how do you manage the overwhelming amount of work so that you carefully plan your own career progression to match your personal preference, your personal passion, and your true sense of purpose. And how do you tie that to an organizational sense of purpose? Because every organization needs to have a sense of purpose. The only gap is that how do you tie that huge big rock, which is organizational sense of purpose, to individuals in the company? And you can see that clearly through employees being present, being emotionally engaged, and being active. And when you see a signs of the opposite, which is employees completely not engaged, employees are trending down in the way they think about their what they do, their performance. This is the key for managers to say, well, maybe the person is in the wrong role. So we need to think about how do we get them into something which will get them more engaged. But if we think that the person is in the right role and there's still a struggle around emotional engagement and the person is not acting and feeling fulfilled, there's a big glaring red flag there, which we might want to address. So I think there is definitely a manager component. I mean, there's a lot of things that data can tell us, but the manager and the immediate environment, the immediate team, which needs to work together on really coming up with that, connectedness on sense of purpose, as well as understanding of how each individual is building their own. If you're an entrepreneur, clearly you have things figured out, or I hope so. But if you're working in a large organization, then there's this big part of what's my role here and how do I meet my own life goals or my own sense of purpose, using the company as a platform, which is for most employees, they think they work for the company. But if you work in the right company, if the mindset of the leadership is the right one, then the company works for you because you are able to fulfill your own personal passion through that company as a platform. And that's what Microsoft is constantly trying to say: be proactive and demand of the company to work for you. And I think that's an underlying, for me, message around how do we think about well-being. Because if you're emotionally engaged, if you're passionate about what you do, if you have work-life integration, then you'll be mentally, mentally, you'll be definitely mentally and emotionally strong, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and if I can add, it's certainly I think you got to then identify some of the triggers that you know, organizations need to have in order to kind of understand you know, what sort of state of mental health is with the employees. And the managers play a big part in trying to kind of understand. So what are those things that you should be looking out for? Organizationally, I think there are instruments out there. There are questionnaires out there used with care, because they certainly, I think, has to be validated. There is one questionnaire that we have in Singapore. It's together with the Ministry of Health. So, you know, using the expertise of trained psychologists. So looking at 5 psychosocial risk areas and coming up with, for the organization, coming up with a dipstick in terms of how employees are faring in those five risk areas. So there are instruments out there. If you want to kind of try them out, those are available on the ministry's website. iWork Health is the instrument that we have here, but certainly I think use instruments that are validated, that have the stamp of authority. Yeah.
I wanted to be like a small comment on the role of the manager. I think it's important. I think we can provide a unique perspective in that regard, because I completely agree. The way companies are currently structured, the role of the manager is key, and the relationship between the manager and the employees is key to address the challenge of employee well-being. The shocking reality that we are seeing from our position working with large and small companies across different continents is that when we compare the concept of informal leadership, in other words, like who you go to when you need technical support, personal support, who inspires you in the organization, when we compare that with a performance assessment and with a managerial flag, sometimes we see that the category that has low performance in the organization sometimes have a higher percentage of informal leaders than the high performance category. This is something shocking to see, that we are seeing now in more and more companies. So the challenge there is, what do you do when you have a manager that is equipped from an organizational perspective to have one-to-one with employees, to have all the best practices, but lacks the respect of the employees, lacks the influence over the employees. And on the other hand, you got some informal leaders in the organization that are not engaged and are using their influence to create resistance against those changes you are trying to implement. I think that's a dimension of it that we are not considering. There is a point where it doesn't matter what of a great job a big corporation can do, really putting all those learning and development initiatives and best practices and really world-class materials at the disposal of the managers. If the personal relationship between the manager and the employee is not working well, we have to approach it from a different perspective. And I'm really shocked to see like how apart are the formal and informal reality in the organizations. And another point I wanted to bring is when we compare the data from email communication, the data from informal leadership, there was actually a negative correlation in the regard that the people that were having the most meetings had less informal respect in the organization. We're trying to figure out, why is this? Is that people are becoming very sensitive with people that schedule meetings without respecting the value of the time of the people? Are people suffering from collaborative overload, like some people like Rob Cross are indicating, right? So I think all these are questions that we have to be asking ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Agatha has a question. How often do you recommend us to organize sessions focused on improving well-being? And what can we do in these sessions?
I think what we do is we try to embed the well-being topics in everything we do, because it's not like a discrete thing which you say, oh, I run it on Monday morning, right? It's something that needs to be deeply embedded in the way organization works. Now, but in order to run these programs effectively, I think you need to have some kind of a understanding on different levels, how it cascades down in the organization. So within a manager and a smaller team, It's something that can happen as often as people connect. And you know, there's, if you look at coaching, for example, like coaching started years ago, and for coaching, you know, when it started, people were talking about coaching being something that you do when you have a coaching session. Now, you know, everybody understands that coaching, every opportunity is a coaching opportunity. So you really, when you talk to, there's a micro coaching opportunity. So similarly, when you talk about things like well-being, and you have an opportunity to really think about not just the what, which is the main reason why well-being is affected, is because we're focused on the outcome and on the result. But also think about the how, which is how we're driving organization to succeed on meeting revenue or meeting, you know, quarterly targets and whatnot. So personally, in Singapore here with our team, we have roughly about 200 people team in Singapore, and another 1,000 plus teams, team members in Asia Pacific, headquartered in Singapore. We run bi-weekly, we run monthly sessions, and these sessions are of different scale. Some of them are focused on, you know, career development, which is also a big component of our people engaged or not engaged. Then we have weekly sessions with, you know, managers and immediate team members. There's regular one-on-one sessions. So I think there's an array of things which you can paint as the things contributing to the overall well-being of the organization, right? There's also trainings as well and all that. So I think it's important for you to understand all of these things which are contributing to employee well-being, on how do you bring employees more on board. Because as Francisco mentioned, I love the comment around learning and training. You can push learning and training as much as you want, but if you have these silos or pockets in the organization which are really pushing back and which are not bought into the, you know, strategy, I think you'll create more churn, and it will create the negative effect. So in this case, is about really understanding how this is landing and how managers individually want to build the plan for their teams on rolling out the well-being concepts. It can be trainings, can be coaching, can be digital assets. It should be always on, but you need to create the right environment on where employees will thrive and where they will seek to consume this content even when they're not with their teams. Like, you don't need a session for employees to consume the content. You can just connect with, you can just expect the employees to consume the content and engage in the conversation because they want to.
Well, okay, we're 3 minutes to the hour, so I'm afraid we'll have to stop here. First of all, I'd like to maybe do a very, very quick wrap up of what I think were the key sound bites. I mean, there were so many great nuggets of wisdom today, but with Mayank, it was look beyond profits. There is ROI in placing an importance on well-being, and look at employees as a whole person, and also use technology and validated tools. And for Boko, it was about cultivating a purpose mindset to get people engaged, include your employees in shaping the workforce of the future, and personalize what is important to employees and tie it into the overall organization's sense of purpose. And for Francisco, it was collaborative freedom. I really like that word. And to use tools and social metrics, such as ONA, to detect isolation, which you might not see. And I think that's a very, very key reality that a lot of us are not looking at. So, well, with 2 minutes left, I'd like to again thank our sponsors. The series is brought to you by Cognitive Talent Solutions, DCH, and HR Tech Hub. And big thanks to our speakers for coming today. Really, really appreciate it. And to all of you for being here. We had, I think, probably at the max 82 persons who joined, and you all stayed on. So thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure, and we appreciate all your time and support. So with that, I'm going to sign off. This is Nat here again saying thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you at the next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.